The scariest part of these Avengers Doomsday leaks isn't Doctor Doom himself, but the realization that the Avengers might already be doing exactly what he wants. What if every rescue mission, every alliance, every heroic move is actually powering his endgame? Let's break down how this multiversal trap might already be in motion. Leak 1. Doom's first move. The Invincible Avengers aren't who you think. What immediately grabbed me about these leaks is how casually they drop us into disaster. There's no slow escalation here, no clean starting line. Avengers Doomsday reportedly opens with incursions already underway, worlds colliding, timelines grinding against each other, and the Avengers being deployed not as conquerors, but as crisis managers. That alone tells us a lot about the tone Marvel might be going for. This isn't a movie about stopping a villain before things go wrong. Things are already wrong. The so-called Invincible Avengers team is where the alarm bells really start ringing. Look at that roster for a second. Thor, Captain Marvel, Hulk-level strength across multiple characters, Wakandan leadership, Namor, the Fantastic Four. This is not a standard Avengers lineup. This is a nuclear option. You don't send a team like this to investigate. You send them to overpower something you believe cannot be reasoned with. And yet, their mission isn't to stop Doom directly. It's to resolve an incursion and rescue Monica Rambeau. That detail matters. It suggests the Avengers believe they're responding to a natural multiversal failure, not a manufactured one. Which raises a deeply uncomfortable possibility. Doom isn't creating the chaos in front of them, he's operating behind it. From a storytelling perspective, this is smart. It puts the audience in the same position as the characters. We think we're watching heroes rush to contain a disaster, when in reality, they may already be moving pieces on Doom's board. The name Invincible Avengers suddenly feels ironic, not because they're weak, but because they might be predictable. What I find especially compelling is how this reframes Doom's role. He doesn't need to smash through Earth with armies or grand speeches. He just needs to understand the rules of the multiverse better than everyone else. And if these leaks are accurate, he does. Leak 2. Universe X was never a safe zone. Here's where the leaks stop feeling like typical Marvel escalation and start feeling genuinely unsettling. Universe X isn't described as a dying timeline or a fractured reality barely holding together. It's described as a mutant utopia, a functioning world where mutants and humans coexist peacefully, a future the X-Men have been fighting toward for decades and actually achieved. That alone flips the emotional script. Because if Universe X is stable, thriving, and peaceful, then the Avengers' presence there isn't heroic by default, it's disruptive. And when you layer in the reported imagery, destroyed Sentinels outside the X-Mansion, it stops looking like collateral damage and starts looking like a message. From a fan perspective, this is where expectations start to fracture. We're used to Avengers movies framing other worlds as broken or dangerous. Here, the implication is that the Avengers might be stepping into the one timeline that actually figured things out. And that puts the X-Men in a completely different narrative position. They're no longer the tragic outsiders or the embattled resistance. They're the custodians of a future worth protecting, which makes Doom's involvement even more suspicious. If his goal were simple domination, Universe X would be the worst possible place to operate. A unified, peaceful society doesn't fracture easily. So why target it? Because peace is fragile when outside forces introduce fear, mistrust, and overwhelming power. This is where the Avengers vs. X-Men tension suddenly makes sense, without feeling cheap. Doom doesn't need them to hate each other. He just needs them to collide at the wrong moment. And once that happens, the utopia cracks. Not because it failed, but because it was attacked. That's a much darker, more adult kind of tragedy. Leak 3. Doom's double game and the incursion that changes everything. This is the point in the leaks where I genuinely stopped and thought, okay, if this works, it's brilliant. If it doesn't, it collapses instantly. Because Doom appears to be doing something that shouldn't be possible, fighting the X-Men openly, while simultaneously manipulating the Avengers from the shadows. On paper, that contradiction feels messy. How can Doom be sending Sentinels into a mutant utopia while also earning the trust of Earth's 606th heroes? How does he kidnap Franklin Richards, destabilize an entire universe, and still present himself as a credible ally elsewhere? But the more you sit with it, the more it starts to feel intentional. This version of Doom isn't choosing a side. He's exploiting perspectives. To the X-Men, he's a tyrant threatening everything they've built. To the Avengers, he may appear as a solution, a guide, or even a familiar face, possibly Tony Stark. That detail, if true, is devastating in the best way. Because trust isn't something Doom forces, it's something he borrows. What excites me here is how this elevates Doom beyond the usual Marvel villain mold. He's not reacting to heroes, he's orchestrating them. Every alliance, every battle, every deployment feels like it's being nudged into place to serve a larger mechanism. And that's where the discomfort really sets in. Because once you realize Doom isn't trying to win a fight, but engineer a situation, you start to wonder how many heroes are already compromised without knowing it. The Avengers might believe they're stopping a collapse. The X-Men might believe they're defending paradise. Doom believes he's pruning the multiverse. And that's a terrifying place to leave the story hanging. Leak 4. The Franklin Richards problem. Once you zoom out from the Avengers versus X-Men tension, one name starts glowing brighter than everything else in these leaks. Franklin Richards. And honestly, the more I think about it, the less this feels like a kidnapping plot, and the more it feels like resource acquisition on a cosmic scale. Franklin isn't just powerful in the Marvel hierarchy, he's reality-bending powerful. The kind of being that doesn't just survive multiversal collapse, but can actively rewrite what comes after. If Doom's ultimate goal involves rebooting reality, stabilizing collapsing timelines, or reshaping existence in his own image, then Franklin isn't a pawn. He's the engine. What's unsettling is how clean this all might be from Doom's perspective. He doesn't need to conquer Earth or wipe out heroes. He just needs access to enough concentrated power to fuel whatever mechanism sits at the center of the multiverse. And that's where the idea of harvesting starts to make uncomfortable sense. Franklin, Wanda, the Phoenix Force, Sentry, Loki. These aren't random fan-favorite names being tossed around for hype. They're all beings tied to creation, destruction, or control at the highest level. And here's the part that really sticks with me. Doom doesn't need these characters dead. He needs them contained, drained, redirected, almost like living conduits feeding something larger than themselves. If you've watched What If closely, especially the Supreme Strange arc, the parallels are impossible to ignore. Gathering powerful beings, funnel them into a single construct, use their combined energy to recreate a universe that was lost. That's not villain logic driven by rage or ego. That's grief logic, obsession logic, the kind that convinces you that the ends justify everything. From a fan perspective, this is where expectations shift again. We're not watching heroes race to stop Doom from destroying reality. We're watching them unknowingly supply the ingredients for him to rebuild it. And if that's true, then every rescue mission, every alliance, every win along the way might actually be Doom tightening his grip. Leak 5. Does everything lead to the void? All roads in these leaks keep bending toward the same destination, the void. And not as a random battleground, but as the place where everything finally converges. Which honestly feels right, because the void has always been Marvel's narrative graveyard. A place where pruned timelines, forgotten variants, and discarded possibilities pile up. If Doom knows the multiverse is collapsing, and the leaks strongly suggest he does, then the void isn't a risk, it's an opportunity. It's where the rules loosen, where power accumulates, and where someone clever enough could operate outside the moral constraints of any single universe. Now layer Loki into that picture. Loki's current position at the Citadel at the end of time already feels less like a throne and more like a load-bearing structure for reality itself. He's not ruling the multiverse in a traditional sense. He's holding it together. And if Doom understands that, really understands it, then Loki isn't an enemy to defeat. He's a lock to be picked. This is where the World Forge theory starts to feel less like wild speculation and more like connective tissue. The visual language matches. The narrative logic matches, and most importantly, Doom's behavior matches. If the Citadel functions as a kind of forge, a place where timelines can be shaped, reset, or reforged, then everything Doom is doing starts pointing in one direction. He's not trying to win a war. He's trying to get access. The idea of a massive battle on the void isn't exciting just because of spectacle. It's exciting because of who would be there. Variants, survivors, characters who already know how broken reality is. People who don't want another reset. Doom arriving with an army, powered by imprisoned gods and reality warpers trying to force his way to Loki. That's not a final act. That's a collision of philosophies about whether the multiverse deserves to continue as it is. And that's a far more interesting conflict than good versus evil. Why these leaks feel different, and why fans are so divided. What really separates these Avengers Doomsday leaks from typical Marvel rumor cycles is how cohesive the ideas are. Even when the details feel messy, there's a spine here, a through line. And it's not built around cameos or shock reveals. It's built around consequence. If Doom is manipulating the Avengers, destabilizing the X-Men's utopia, harvesting reality-level beings, and moving toward the void with a clear understanding of how everything ends, then this movie isn't about stopping him in time. It's about realizing, too late, that the system itself has already failed. That's why fans are split. Some people hear this and think it sounds convoluted, overstuffed, or impossible to pull off. And that's fair. This is ambitious in a way Marvel hasn't really attempted since Infinity War. But others, myself included, hear something else entirely. We hear Marvel finally trusting its audience to follow a story that doesn't hold your hand and doesn't reset neatly at the end. This version of Doomsday wouldn't just raise stakes. It would interrogate them. It would ask whether heroes who punch hardest are actually the right ones to save a collapsing multiverse. It would ask whether peace, like Universe X, can survive contact with fear-driven intervention. And it would ask whether resetting reality is mercy or just control dressed up as sacrifice. And maybe most importantly, it reframes Doom, not as a mustache-twirling tyrant, but as the only character willing to do what no one else can stomach. That doesn't make him right, but it makes him terrifyingly believable. If even half of this makes it to the screen, Avengers Doomsday won't feel like the end of a saga. It'll feel like the moment Marvel admits that some problems don't have clean solutions, only choices and the fallout that comes with them.